Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Wise Decision Maker Show, where we help you make the wisest and most profitable decisions. And today we'll talk about the wisest and most profitable decisions on returning back to the office and figuring out the future of work in terms of hybrid and remote collaboration, specifically issues around idea generation, serendipitous idea generation, innovation. That is the essence of what we want to talk about today. Now, as you very well might know, a very common reason for leaders who are pushing a return to the office. Plenty of people want to go back to the office 4 or 5 days a week. They want the whole back to the office Monday through Friday, 9 to 5 or something like that, or 8 to 6 for those who want 4 days a week. That is a common refrain I hear a lot from leaders who want to go back to the office for the companies that have helped transition into the future of work. They are really worried about innovation. So that's the issue that they're worried about. They perceive innovation, fundamentally serendipitous innovation, unanticipated innovation, to come from hallway conversations. And those hallway conversations is the basis for that serendipitous generation of ideas, unexpected ideas. And these leaders missed out on these unexpected serendipitous ideas during the lockdowns. And they're really worried that the rivals who are going back to the office Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, the whole workday, the more time you spend together in the office, the more they think you will maximize those ideas, get as many hallway conversations happening as possible, hallway conversations, post-meeting conversations, whatever, all of those sorts of things happening, and then you'll get as many ideas as possible. Well, here's the thing. They did not really adopt the best practices for serendipitous idea generation remotely during the pandemic. What happened during the March 2020 lockdowns is that they imposed their methods that they traditionally used for in-office collaboration. They imposed them on remote collaboration during the pandemic. So they didn't really adopt many innovative best practices that are suited to remote work or to hybrid work. And that is why they're pushing for a wholesale return to the office once the vaccine became available, despite the new variants that are coming up, which are clearly quite dangerous for a full office return, and despite the challenges of retention and recruitment that are associated with forcing office workers back to the office who can do their job quite fine, full-time remotely or in a hybrid schedule. Being forced back to the office is not a good idea if you want to keep your best talent. Now, consider lots and lots of surveys, external surveys, major surveys conducted after widespread vaccination was fully available, show that employees really prefer to have hybrid work or remote work. Something like a quarter to a third prefer full-time remote work. Over half prefer hybrid schedules. Only something like 10 to 20% want full-time in-office work, and we're of course talking only about the 50% of workers who can work full-time remotely. And you know what? Something like 2/5 to over half said that they would resign if they're forced to go back to the office full-time, if they're not given their preferred flexible schedule. This is a huge danger for successful innovation. You might have heard about the Great Resignation, also called the Great Quit. We've seen huge numbers of employees resigning in the months after vaccination became widely available. 3 million, 3.4 million, 3.7 million, over 4 million. These are huge numbers considering that the American workforce is not that much, something like 150 million. And you see these huge resignations, 2-3% of the American workforce. This is astounding, much, much higher than people have ever resigned before, voluntarily leaving for another job. The desire for flexibility is a major driver of this resignation. And here we see the signs of mismanagement. Leaders are making really bad decisions. And there's a lot of resistance by office workers to going back to the office. So there's resignations. You see a lot of demoralized people in the workplace. And this happens at the very top companies: Google, Apple, Amazon, Uber. All of these companies, you see the leadership pushing office workers back to the office. They want an office-centric culture, they say. And then you see other companies starting recruitment campaigns for the workers at Google, at Amazon, at Uber, at Apple. And the top employees are leaving and the rest of the employees are demoralized because their office leadership is pushing them back to the office. And this is a serious issue. And we see that these companies are making very bad mistakes because they've turned around and they said, oops, we screwed up. Google was throughout the pandemic saying that, hey, we're going to force everyone back to the office. We want an office-centric culture. And they had many people resigning. So on May 5th, they said, we screwed up. We'll allow up to 20% of our workforce to work full-time remotely. Amazon was saying they wanted everyone 9 to 5 back to the office. Then they changed their tunes kind of on June 10th. They said, we'll have people back in the office 3 days a week. And then they changed again on October 10th, saying that, well, we screwed up. We're going to have our people just be team-led model where people are going back on a basis that the team leader suggests, here's what we shall do. And so that lower level decision making, not the top level decision making, which is something I've been advocating since the start of the widespread vaccination in my book on this topic, returning to the office and leading hybrid and remote teams, benchmarking to best practices for competitive advantage. And that was published in May 2021. So Amazon is really behind the times. So is Google, so are many other companies. And many other companies, Goldman Sachs and so on, JP Morgan, are still trying to force their employees back to the office, so have an office-centric culture. Very bad idea. The problem here is cognitive biases, dangerous judgment errors that cause us to make bad decisions. And so this is what results in leaders, the dangerous judgment errors, these cognitive biases that cause us to make problematic decisions, cause us to not adapt to the new situation that we're facing ourselves, into which we're facing now, and not to adopt best practices to use in this new situation. People just really favor what they're comfortable with. And so here's one of the cognitive biases that's really dangerous, called the status quo bias. We want to go back or maintain the ways of doing things that we know, our old style ways of doing things that we're comfortable with. Leaders really want to go back to January 2020. They're successful in that setting. They know how to manage people in that setting. And so that status quo bias causes leaders to try to push back and go back to that office-centric culture with which they're familiar. Unfortunately, that causes them a lot of problems because the context changed. We fundamentally changed our values, habits, norms, preferences. People are not overwhelmingly willing to go back to that office-centric culture. So top employees are leaving, and companies, the biggest companies, trillion-dollar companies that usually have hugely high retention, are not retaining their talent. That is one big problem, the status quo bias. Another big problem is called the ostrich effect. That refers to the mythical notion of ostriches burying their head in the sands when they see dangers. Of course, that's not what actually happens, but that's the myth, and that's what the ostrich effect is named after. This is about denial of negative reality. So leaders deny negative reality despite plenty of data showing them that what they're trying to do is leading to bad outcomes, like employees resigning. And they deny these uncomfortable facts. That's a top reason why CEOs get fired, actually. There was a study of 1,087 board members of organizations that fired their CEOs. The top 5 reason, 23% of the CEOs were fired for denying negative reality. So clearly, this is a prevalent and problematic tendency. Now, in order to adopt best practices for the future of work, we need to focus on the hybrid model, where most people come in 1 to 2 days a week. Some people come in full-time remotely. You match the employee desires to maximize retention. And then the teams are the ones who decide, the team leaders, as I was talking about from the early on when vaccines were becoming widely available. Team leaders need to make the decision. They are the ones who know what their team needs best. That's what optimizes collaboration and boosts retention. So that is what you want to go for. As part of that, let's circle back to the beginning about the serendipitous idea generation. What's that about, right? How do you do that in remote settings? What you want to realize is that the leaders who try to transpose their in-office based practices on remote work did not do a very good job. It does not work very well to try to use in-office practices for full-time remote work or for hybrid work. Instead, in order to have effective serendipitous innovation in remote or hybrid teams, you want to create specific virtual venues that are customized to serendipitous generation, to people's incentives, motivations, and the way that it is appropriate and effective for them to collaborate in remote and hybrid settings. So those incentives, that's what you want to be thinking about. So how do you do this? What's the practical way of doing this? Well, think about your virtual collaboration platform, whether it's Slack, whether it's Microsoft Teams, whether it's Trello, whatever it is. Set up a venue, a channel in Slack or Teams, a card in Trello that people can use for serendipitous idea generation for each team, for cross-functional teams, for broader business units, if you have a smaller company, the organization as a whole, or a business unit of the company. And then for that's a native digital format that people can use effectively. What they do use it for is as an open space to share innovative ideas. So members, when someone has an innovative idea, they put it in the appropriate channel, whether it's relevant to the team, to the business unit, to the cross-functional team, to the organization as a whole. And then other people get notifications or somehow they check the channel, depends on which other collaboration software you're using. They evaluate the idea, they comment on it, their feedback, and then if it snowballs and reaches critical mass, that's when you can move forward and you can have that idea going forward. So you have a lot of well-considered innovative ideas resulting from this development. Now, that fits members' natural motivations and engagements. Think about what happens. The person who shares the idea gets credit, of course, because they share the idea. They are the innovator. And then the people who give feedback are the improvers, so they get credit as well. They're valuable contributors. That fits everyone's needs and everyone's desires, and they get that appropriate reputational benefit from it. And of course, that sometimes leads to patenting, and you want to know who helped come up with the idea for patenting purposes, so that's great as well. It maximizes different strengths. So if you think about the optimists and the pessimists on your team, you have that neurodiversity, right? Some people are more optimistic. They're really the idea generators. And the pessimists are the ones who improve ideas. So this provides a really good balance for both of them. The optimists will generate ideas, the pessimists will improve them. Now, there are a lot of other benefits of this format. It enhances people's ability to work together, to be a team, to collaborate effectively. It helps them be creative, and it takes advantage of members' strengths, optimists, pessimists, and compensate for weaknesses. They don't have to do the thing that they're weak at. So this is a really great technique to adapt to the future of work, which is really going to be hybrid and remote. So there's going to be a bunch of people who are hybrid, a large minority of people who are going to be full-time remote, and only a small proportion of people who will be coming into the office. And so that is what I want to share about serendipitous idea generation in hybrid and remote teams. All right, everyone. I hope you've benefited from this episode of the Wise Decision Maker Show. Please click like on the show. Please follow us on whatever venue you've heard this. It might be on YouTube where you saw the video. It might be on Amazon or Apple Podcasts where you heard the podcast. Please subscribe. Make sure you keep getting all our videos, all our podcasts going forward. Check out the show notes for much more information on the topic of serendipitous idea generation. All right, everyone. I hope you send me your ideas on what you thought about this. My email is gleb, Gleb, at disasteravoidanceexperts.com. Again, gleb at disasteravoidanceexperts.com. Happy to share more information about this topic and hear your ideas when you send them to me. In the meantime, I hope you will make the wisest and most profitable decisions. Until I see you next time, my friends.